This is your second geography lesson of the week. And yeah, welcome Leonardo. It's first on the chat. I hope you've all had an excellent day. I hope you've enjoyed the live so far today. If anyone's got any feedback, keep that in mind and post it on the chat and say hi. Hello, Jeff. Oh, thanks. Got my happy jacket on today. I've been wearing it all week and it's worked a treat. So dress how you want to feel. Dress your best every day. That's what I say. Now I'm trying to just quickly adjust to it's golden hour in the UK, which is, if you're not aware, is when the lighting is the most flattering for an excellent shot of your face. So if I go in and out of looking like I've got kind of weird lighting, that's why. But it's okay. We'll be fine. Right, let's get going. Lovely to see you all. Jeff just said that he's been in school today. Jeff, lucky you. I would actually love to be in school. I've been asking my head teacher if she needs me to come back in. I'm probably the only teacher who's done that. But yeah, Jeff, hope you had a good day at school today. It must be a bit strange and quiet. Okay, let's get cracking. So, we are going to start today with a totally inoffensive and normal question, which is, oh yeah, and by the way, yeah, just so I'm absolutely. I'm being reminded to say thank you to Jeff's parents, because the reason Jeff was in school today is because his parents are key workers. Anyone else who's watching whose parents are health workers, amazing. It's an amazing job they're doing. They're putting so much at stake, them going into work every day, and what would we be doing without them? So thank you, absolutely. Okay, so very interesting question, I think, and hopefully not an offensive question for some people. Some people may, if they are in any way affiliated with France, take the stereotypes that I've intentionally placed on the screen for the purposes of what we're learning about today, a little bit offensively, which is fine. But why? Basically the question is France a country? And why do the things that I've presented make France a country? Like, what am I trying to imply by presenting you with these images? Any ideas? Is France really a country? And what do these pictures have to do with it is the question. Jeff has said French culture. Absolutely. So why is culture important when it comes to a country being considered a country? Like, why is culture an important part of being a country? We said culture. I'm going to write it down so we can reference it later. Okay, Saffron said cultural stereotypes. Yeah, absolutely. These are all banging cultural stereotypes. I mean, I wish our country was associated with all the best things like cheese and wine and nice bread. Okay, absolutely. Having a shared culture makes people who live in that country feel like they belong to a shared national identity. Okay, so when we talk about national identity, this is really important when it comes to, and I want you to remember this word because we're going to be using it a bit later on in the live, and we'll get used to using it more as we go along. National identity creates legitimacy for a country. So if someone was going to Google your country and they could immediately get a sense of like what your country was about, like what makes France France, okay? What makes it unique to France? What makes some things unique to France, right? This creates a sense of place and a sense of belonging, okay? A national identity. And this is really important when it comes to defining a country as a country. And we're going to get into the kind of the technicalities behind what makes a country today. And we're going to use 3 different examples to kind of understand like what this actually means, right? It's such a complex thing that I think actually by the end of today, you're going to feel really confident explaining to anyone across the dinner table, and you'll hopefully have a bit more knowledge of it. Okay, so by the end, we're going to be answering this question: do borders really exist? A massive question. So let's get going. If you have a bit of paper to hand, if you don't worry, you can just keep it in your head and just be listening along and kind of be thinking as we go along. But if you've got a bit of paper, can you draw this sliding scale? It's my favourite thing to do as we are going through our learning, is to map what we understand onto a sliding scale. It's a great thing to do. So, and this is when you're forming an argument as well. If you're trying to kind of when you're writing essays and you're trying to develop your argument, your evidence towards something, this is a really good way of trying to plan that. So do borders really exist? Hard answer is yes, they do. Don't be silly. Like, countries are countries. They're on a map. Yes, they do exist. Sort of, maybe. Excellent grammar. Is when we're getting into the kind of complexities of this, like, are there actually some things that make this a really complicated question, that borders aren't as black and white, they aren't as clear as they are on a map, and to what meets the eye, okay? And then no, if we're getting really anarchist and we're getting really, we're getting a bit anarchist, and we're saying that actually maybe there are certain factors that take away the legitimacy of... that's okay, Angels. Angels saying, hey, I'm late. That's okay. You're not late. You wouldn't be getting a late mark at my if this was my school, you wouldn't be getting a late detention, is what I'm saying. Even though the school I work in, you do get late detentions. But yeah, Angel, hello, welcome. So can you draw that sliding scale? And as we're going along today, I want you to try and add evidence to the sliding scale to answer that question, okay? Do borders really exist? And then we're going to see where our kind of opinions lie by the end of the live. Just to be clear, anarchist means, thank you, Mirs, anarchist means someone who doesn't recognise government control of a country and believes that actually people should govern themselves, that the government is not acting in the common person's interest, and that we should just get rid of government, okay? So Russell Brand, you might have heard of him, famous dude, actor, writer, comedian. He has, he's said lots of things which people consider to be anarchist, right? That the government's not doing their job and that we should abandon all government, okay? So, has everyone got the sliding scale already? Right, here we go. People are already asking great questions. Thank you for asking. So, Jeff. Now we're going to get into some slightly more complex territory. So just hold on for a second, because it will become clear once we finish, okay? Okay, so here's another word for you. We've talked about legitimacy. We've talked about anarchists, big words. Sovereignty. So national sovereign states are what we call a political entity. And a political entity is, if you imagine, it's something that is a government. So a political entity, you can literally just say, is a government, okay? The national government of a country. And what we understand as a national sovereign state is defined by 3 things, 3 really clear things, okay? The land that it defines this territory, so it has a border, it has a physical territory, okay? The ability for it to govern without anyone else interfering. So, for example, during the Cold War, between the USSR, former USSR, which is now Russia, and the USA, the USA was essentially what was saying? People said that they were placing essentially spies in other countries in South America and trying to overthrow the communist dictators of those countries. So they're trying to create a situation where people would rise up against their communist dictators. Now that's acting against the sovereignty of a country. So that would mean that technically those nations like Bolivia, like Venezuela, they didn't have sovereign kind of status. Okay, didn't make them a sovereign state, but they are sovereign states because the third point is really important. They are recognised by other countries. Okay, so in organisations like the UN, countries, so there's 196 countries that are across the world that are recognised by the United Nations. Okay, and this is really important because this again makes a country a sovereign state. So it has control over its physical territory, control over its ability to govern without anyone getting involved, so without any other governments getting involved. And then it's also recognised by other countries. For example, all the 196 countries that are part of the UN. Okay? Any questions before I move on? Now, Leonardo has asked a great question. What if a country wants more land? That means they would have to get permission from the UN to invade. So, for example, when the USA wanted to invade Iraq during the Iraq War, obviously the USA didn't technically want its land. It might have wanted the oil, but it didn't want to necessarily make Iraq part of the USA. It had to get permission from the UN Security Council to be able to do that. So if a country nowadays would want to invade another country or take a bit of land from another country, they would have to get recognition from all the 196 countries in the UN, and particularly the UN Security Council. Okay. Jeff has asked whether the Vatican City is a country. It is, because again, it has a physical territory. It's the perimeter of the Vatican City is bordered by a wall, I think, and is policed as well. It has its own currency and laws. I think, like in terms of they have their own security service. They essentially police themselves. I think they probably subscribe to, so they agree with the laws of Italian government as well. But that's an interesting question. And then they are also recognised by other countries, and they're probably recognised, Jeff, because lots of other countries are Catholic, and it would be a massive statement if they didn't recognise the Vatican City. But yeah, good question. City-states are an interesting one. Have I got any other questions about what sovereignty means and why it's, like, we'll get into why it's important in a second, but sovereignty, right. Oh, yes, KC. Welcome, Casey. We are going to talk about Catalonia at the end of the live, but let me address it now, okay? So Catalonia is a state that's part of Spain, and it's where Barcelona is based, okay? And so Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia, and people in Catalonia speak a different dialect of Spanish. It sounds very, very different, which is Catalan. Catalonia is not considered a country. It's not a sovereign state. And that's why the leader of the Independence Party, I'm totally forgetting his name, but he got put in prison for, I think, for treason, which is really interesting. You think of it, treason as being like a thing that happened in the past, people got hung for as well. But Catalonia is not a sovereign state, Casey, to answer your question. Okay. Really good question. I think from Matt. Might not be Matt, might be Henry. You do need laws. You do need to have a constitution to be able to govern yourself, right? So you have to have laws to be considered a sovereign state. How many laws and what your constitution looks like is totally up to you, but you do need to have them to be able to govern, okay, to govern the people of your country. Great questions. Right. This is the first example we're going to cover. So you can make sure you go back to your sliding scale and think about where this example sits on the yes, sort of maybe, and no scale, okay? So, Taiwan. Does anyone know anything about Taiwan and why it's not a sovereign state? Why is it not considered a sovereign nation state? Jeff has said, Jeff's made an excellent point. And this is exactly why Taiwan isn't considered a sovereign state. And I'll explain why. So Jeff has said, is it a capitalist version of China? That's actually a really brilliant way of putting it. So the People's Republic of China is what we know today as the sovereign state of China, okay? The Republic of China is what is known as Taiwan. Now, after a civil war that I think kicked off in about 1947 and finished in 1950, Taiwan and China mutually agreed to not be governed. So Taiwan basically said, we don't want to be governed by the Communist Party of China. We want to be the nationalist government of China. And they were exiled, so they escaped to the island of Taiwan, and they formed their own Republic of China in protest against the communist state. Okay? And to Angel, you're absolutely right. Mears, you're absolutely right. So essentially, what this means is that the People's Republic of China does not recognise Taiwan as the legitimate government of China. It's a very weird way. Like, the fact that Taiwan is called the Republic of China is, like, in some ways quite confusing, because you're like, there can't be two Chinas. Why would there be two Chinas? But this is because of the communist government of China and the nationalist government of Taiwan, okay, wanting to create a separate government after that civil war in 1950. And what happened in 1971 is that the People's Republic of China was voted into the UN by 2/3 vote as the only legitimate representative of China in the UN. Now, why is this important to Taiwan being recognised as a country? Why does this not make Taiwan a country? If the UN voted the People's Republic of China in as the only legitimate representative of China, why does that not make Taiwan a sovereign state? Right, Jeff said that it's not a member of the UN. Yes. And what does a membership of the UN give you? What's that important word beginning with S that we've already learnt about today? What's it give? Right, so Angel, good. Excellent. Sovereignty, okay? So this means, because it's not recognised in the UN, it's technically not a sovereign state. It does govern itself, it does have a physical border, but it's not recognised by other countries. It's not recognised by the 196 countries of the UN. Okay. Leonardo says it has the same laws as China. It has an agreement in 1992, I think this is correct, where they've agreed to, like, they've had a mutual agreement to not divide themselves, like, not be completely divided, but to recognise the government of both countries. But technically Taiwan has all its own trade agreements with the USA. It has Apple, for example, manufacture a lot of their products in Taiwan. The USA has quite a large military base there with about 30,000 troops. So it still does have its own. It does have its own laws. Really interesting final little point about this is that China in 2018, the government of China, of the People's Republic of China, shut down the Marriott Hotels website in China, which is like a big hotel chain, a bit like Travelodge, or I don't know which other ones, Hilton or whatever. They shut down the website of the Marriott Hotel because they'd included Taiwan on their customer survey as a country. So they were getting feedback from people that stayed in their hotels, and they listed Taiwan as a country as well. I think also Tibet as well, which is another disputed territory. I'm going to circle it on here, which China disputes the sovereignty of. Okay, so they completely shut down the website. They demanded that any national company, international company working in China could not include the Taiwanese flag on their website. So China is incredibly sensitive about Taiwan taking away its sovereign status, right? Taking away its legitimacy, because they're worried about people identifying as Taiwanese and having this Taiwanese identity. That's a really important bit of it. And they also want to legitimize their government, right? They want to create legitimacy for the Chinese government. And Angel, yeah, Tibet's a really important, a really interesting bit about sovereignty. Actually, we might run out of time to talk about the next couple of examples, so we might go back to Tibet in a second. Okay, can we do a little summary sentence? Just if everyone types in the chat, I just want to hear your initial kind of ideas and your initial understanding. Okay, borders do exist for Taiwan, but how would we finish that sentence to try and summarize what we've just learned about Taiwan? Right. Angel's made a really good point about the culture and the national identity of a country being really subjective, and how the name of a country is if people call themselves Taiwanese, then that means that they're separate from China. Like, why can't they be a separate country to China? But the problem is that since that civil war, they haven't been given that status as a separate government by other countries. So what Jeff has just said, it is not recognised as a sovereign state by the UN. So borders do exist for Taiwan, but it is not recognised as a sovereign state by other countries in the UN. That is the main issue. Okay, so we've kind of covered what we talked about as our third point, which is recognition by other countries. Okay, when we're thinking about sovereignty. Okay, good, really, really good. It keeps buffering. This may be. Hopefully, this isn't my internet. I'm not sure if it is. It could be. It might be working quite hard now that everyone's starting to watch Netflix, isn't it? This is the time when everyone's finishing their day. Right, what time are we on? 25 past. Whoa, okay. We're going to be quick with this one. Now, has anyone heard of Lviv? Quick hands up. Lviv is a city in the west of Ukraine, and it's got a very interesting history. Oh, Jeff's heard of Lviv. Cool. Okay, Jeff, did you know that Lviv used to be called Lvov? It had a different name. Does anyone know why Lviv used to be called Lvov? Why has it had so many different names? Affection has heard of it. Cool. Why has it been called Lvov? Different name. Very confusing for the people that live there. Right, Jeff, absolutely. Lviv, the current city of Lviv, that's currently found in the western Ukraine, it's part of Ukraine, has changed national affiliations, so like changed the country that it's part of 8 times since the Middle Ages. Okay, so it was part of the Polish Empire in the Middle Ages. It was then part of the Habsburg Empire, which was a German kind of trading empire. Then in 1918, it became part of Western Ukraine. So it went back to being part of Ukraine. Okay. It then, between the wars, it was part of Poland. It then it became part of Germany after it was invaded during 1939. Okay. It became maybe part of the USSR, but we'll go back to that. Then it became, in 1941, it became part of Germany. That's it. became part of Germany. So it's part of the USSR in 1939. Then it became part of Germany when it was invaded in 1941. Then it went back to being part of the Soviet Union in 1945. And now, after the Soviet Union fell in... Oh, I've got a little... After the Soviet Union fell in 1991, end of the Soviet Union, end of the Cold War, it then became part of independent Ukraine. So 8 times it has become... It has changed technically the nation it's part of, okay? So this border that we can see on the map, this must have changed multiple times, right? You think about how many times that Lviv has essentially moved around and become part of a different country. So the language they speak there has been influenced by all of these different national identities, okay? So in terms of borders really existing, it's really a case of like this very complex kind of political relationship with other countries, right? Whether you've been invaded. So really interestingly, does anyone know who this guy is that I've put? But it was great while it lasted. It relates to the Soviet Union. Who's been doing their homework since we did our Should Everyone Be Paid the Same live? Does anyone know who this is? It's Lenin. Okay, the original leader of the Soviet Union. Oh, thanks, Affectioner. You got in there. I think the lag, I need to make sure I could pay attention to the lag. Okay. So what they did in Lviv is when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, they ripped down loads of statues of Lenin to try and remove the association with the Soviet Union, to try and bring back its association with the Ukraine as being part of the national sovereign state of Ukraine. And what they did is that in recent years they put up 2 statues. This is a really interesting kind of exercise in like national identity as well. Stepan, he was the man who declared independence for Ukraine after the Soviet Union fell. So he was like the independence leader. After the Second World War, so independence from Germany. And poet Taras, he's a really famous Ukrainian poet who I believe probably lived in Lviv. And he's, again, is identifying Lviv with Ukraine. So these really important political figures and kind of national figures that define national identity are trying to give people of Lviv this sense that they're part of Ukraine. So, in terms of borders existing for Lviv, how does this affect them as a country? Let's think about our summary sentence. Let's go back to this. So, the borders do exist for Lviv, but what is complicated about the borders, the border that Lviv now has, the border of Ukraine? What makes the border that Lviv has on the western side of Ukraine more complicated than just being a border? One, is it just associated with Ukraine? Is it just part of the Ukrainian national identity? Right, so so Jeff said that Ukraine might claim it to be, Ukraine is definitely claiming it to be part of its country, right? Like it now claims it, but actually, are there people in Lviv? But yeah, it's switched a lot of times, now the Angel said it's not fully recognised. The problem of it being recognised is actually quite closely linked to Russia, and Russia, because the Ukraine is so in terms of its cultural links to Russia, so lots of people in Ukraine speak Russian. You might have heard of the Crimea, which is I'll show you on the map. Ooh. So the Crimea here. I really hope I'm getting this right. If I haven't got this right, I'm going to be really embarrassed. The Crimea in Ukraine has lots of people in the Crimea actually do speak Russian because of being part of the Soviet Union, but they are part of Ukraine, and there's a war going on there at the moment between Russia and Crimea, because of this Russia believing that it's part of its territory, but actually people of Crimea, some people want to be part of Ukraine, some people want to be part of Russia, but that's why there's a civil war there. So this kind of territorial issue, the main reason why it's complicated for Lviv is because physical borders don't always kind of define people's national identity. They're not always the be all and end all of whether a country is considered a country by the people that are in it. So Lviv is really about the kind of population, right, of the people that live in Lviv. And do they really consider themselves Ukrainian? Does it really matter if they're Ukrainian? They might speak a bit of Russian. They might go to Russia on holiday. There's lots of things that make it that border almost a bit unimportant. Okay, so we got our final example. I think we've got time for. I hope we've got time for. Yeah, we do. We've got time for it. So trying to get Crimea to say they wanted to be Russian. Matt or Henry is asking whether the Russians went into Crimea because people wanted it to happen. It's still disputed. They never voted on it. People were never asked, like, is this something you want? Is succession, which means succession means when a country becomes part of another country, so you succeed to become part of Russia, okay? They were never asked to vote on succession to Russia. So actually that we don't know. We don't know what people wanted in Crimea. But again, the people in a place legitimize a country being a country, right? So the population of a country is really important if we're going to give a country national sovereignty. And actually, just on that point, if people in a country don't agree to the laws of the country, and don't recognise themselves as being as adhering to those laws, as being as having to abide by those laws, then that government can't govern those people. So it's about the people. Just we go back to this point too. Again, it's about the citizens, about the people in the country as well. Okay, that gives them that sovereign legitimacy. Okay, we've got one final example to do, and we've been doing our borders slide and scale. Hopefully we've covered a lot of ground, which is great. So final example. Does anyone know why Egypt has such straight borders? Why are the borders of Egypt so unbelievably straight? Why do they have such straight borders in Egypt? It's a bit weird. Right, Mears has said drawn with a ruler. Yes, it will shock you to realise that in 1984, right, here we go. Jeff is getting onto it. I'm going to explain. In 1984, there was a conference called the Conference of Berlin. And what this was a conference between European nations like Britain, Germany, Belgium, France, Portugal. And what they did is they got together and they agreed on what part of Africa they wanted. Okay, which parts of Africa they had territorial claim over. So the Conference of Berlin in 1984 is the reason. So literally it was people getting together and saying, this is my bit. No, this is my bit. This is my bit. So Egypt was part of the British Empire back in the day, if you weren't aware. And does anyone know which king this is? It relates to a European country I've just mentioned. And I'm going to tell you about him in a second. Who is he? King who? Not King Bertwali. Yeah, so entitled. Okay, this is King Leopold II. Okay, and he's a very bad man. I don't think people would dispute the fact that he was a very bad man. He was given the Congo, which is a Central African country. I'm just outlining on the map here. he was given the Congo as his own personal state. So he was the ruler of that state, and he was the only person who controlled what happened within the borders of the Congo. Okay, so he used it for resources. He used it to transport slaves out of the country. He wasn't a very nice man. And it became, once King Leopold, I think, lost his kind of, I don't know, his kingly status, it was taken away from him as his own personal, like, empire, essentially. And it became part of Belgium. So it was part of the Belgian Empire until it became independent, I think in about the 1970s, okay? So the reason why this is important is because what this does to African states is it takes away, in the present day, it takes away their legitimacy as a sovereign state, because in a country like the Congo, there are 200 different languages spoken within its borders, and there are numerous ethnic groups that are associated with these 200 languages. And this makes it really hard for a country like the Congo to govern within its own borders, because they don't have the unity, that national identity that we talked about, that France had. It doesn't have that same kind of unified national identity that legitimizes them as a country. Okay, so to conclude, and just so you know, a lot of the conflicts within Africa, and this, I'm really annoyed that I have to skip over this, but it's fine. We can maybe talk about African civil wars at another time. Jolly topic. A lot of the causes of civil war in Africa is because of these borders being drawn in the Conference of Berlin, is because of these these clashes of ethnic identity. So, to conclude, do we think borders exist? Tell me whether you think they exist. Are they real? Do they matter? I want your final thoughts. And I've put some of the countries that we've discussed up on the question mark to get you thinking. Okay. Oh, thanks, Leonardo. It is 6:40. We should probably finish up there. In terms of, right, if everything lines, Mia's is saying, if everything lines, yes. If you're able to, and Affection is saying, if you check out the atlas, check out the Atlas of Countries That Don't Exist by Nick Middleton. That's a great recommendation, Affection. Thank you. If people want to read something that's relevant. This quote is actually taken from another book called Prisoners of Geography by a man called Tim Marshall. So you should check that book out as well if you're interested in what we talked about today. Jeff said it's subjective. Yeah, it's subjective. The main thing that makes it complex is this idea of sovereignty, right? Those three things that make a country a legitimate nation state. And if you take into account all those three factors, the fact that, and I'm going to go back to this now, okay, as our final point, does it have a physical, a defined physical territory? Is the border really clear? Does it, can it govern its people? Does it have laws that govern everyone within the country? And then finally, is it recognised by other countries? All those three things have to align, as some of you have already said, for it to work. Thanks so much, everyone, for your contributions and your thoughts today. Jeff, Angel, super active on the chat. Thank you so much. Shout out to you guys. I hope you found today interesting. I've gone a little bit over today, so I'm going to wrap it up quite quickly. There's the human. Angel's made a really great final point, which I want to say out loud and read back to you guys. Is that it's to create legitimacy? There's a lot of human constructs, like as in literally it's a human to human agreement that a country is a country, that a border is real, and that actually it's not. Some of them are physical. In Europe, a lot of our borders have been created by physical barriers, like the Alps, like rivers in around Europe, access to different physical resources like fertile land. But a lot of it in the present day is about humans, is about people agreeing in a political way to whether a country is a country. So really great point. Thank you, Angel, for that final point. And yeah, I'm going to finish up there just because we've gone over a little bit. But lovely to see you all. Take care of yourselves and have a lovely evening.